Hey, what's up, everybody? Tim Albrecht here, and welcome to this week's episode of the Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast, where we feature questions from you, the YFP community, to be answered by one of our very own fee-only certified financial planners. Please note this podcast is intended for educational purposes and should not be considered financial or investment advice, as we do not know all the variables to one's personal situation when answering a question. Before we jump into today's question, a shout out to our extraordinary YFP financial planning team that makes this segment possible. Your Financial Pharmacist offers fee-only comprehensive financial planning services that are customized to the pharmacy professional. So whether you want to pay off your student loans, make the right investment decisions, or simply build a solid financial plan, we'll help get your income working for you rather than the other way around. You can learn more by visiting yfpplanning.com. Again, that's yfpplanning.com. Okay, this week's question comes from Anthony in Houston, Texas.
Hi, Tim and team. This is Anthony from Houston, Texas. So I am planning to redistribute my stock portfolio and looking for an optimal way for tax benefit. I have two-part questions. First, right now I have a regular individual brokerage account. Should I change it to a Roth IRA or traditional IRA? If I can, how much tax do I have to pay? Second question, if I sell all the stock that I have held for about 4 months, which I bought during the March dip, to buy different stock, not cash out. So all the capital gain I plan to keep it inside my stock broker account without cashing out. How much tax do I have to pay for the capital gain? And any other tax I have to pay? So what is the minimum amount of holding time to avoid this type of tax? Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony, for submitting your question to be featured on this week's Ask a YFP CFP segment of the Your Financial Pharmacist Podcast. Tim Baker, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so with this, again, there's a lot of potentially wrinkles that we'd have to figure out how to best proceed with this type of redistribution. And I'm actually happy that this question is asked, because we work with a lot of clients that for one reason or another have a stock portfolio or a taxable account without doing some of the basics like emergency fund or paying off consumer debt or even starting to fund IRAs. So this is a good question to work through. So I think the big points were, I have a regular brokerage account and I want to change it to a traditional IRA. What are the tax implications? So one of the things that we kind of talk about is accounts that have the triple tax benefit, the HSA, and most of these, other accounts, 401k, IRA, have a double tax benefit. So what do I mean by that? So, for a traditional IRA that Anthony's asking about, the two tax benefits that you have is that, depending on your income, you can get a deduction for the monies that go into that account. So you get a pre-tax deduction. So if I make $50,000 and I'm single and I put $5,000 in a traditional IRA, essentially I'm being taxed on $45,000. And then the other benefit is that inside of that account, which this is more pertinent to the question at hand, inside of that account, it grows tax free. So what do I mean by that? So if I buy an ETF or a stock, we'll call it ABC, and I buy it at $50 a share, and then I sell it at $60 a share, I realize a $10 per share capital gain. Now, in an IRA, in one of these tax preferred accounts, it doesn't matter. I'm not taxed on that capital gain. But in a regular brokerage account that Anthony has, you are taxed on that capital gain. So that can play a big piece when you go to file your taxes. So that's one of the two tax benefits of the IRA, the 401k, et cetera. It doesn't really matter what happens inside the account from a tax perspective. There is no taxable event. So in Anthony's case, what we want to do to move the money from the taxable account to the traditional IRA is basically sell off that amount that we're going to move. So as we know, you can put $6,000 a year, with certain age restrictions. There's a catch up, but $6,000 per year into the IRA. So you would essentially sell off $6,000 worth of stock or mutual funds, ETFs, and move that into cash, and then journal that over into an IRA. So you basically be transferring that money over from the taxable account into the IRA. Now, when you go to sell those, there's a few things. You have things like tax loss harvesting, which is really offsetting gains with losses. So let's pretend I have $4,000 in gains. So I'm basically, I buy, a certain position at 100 and I sell it for 200. Let's pretend that gain is for $4,000. And then I have a loss of $4,000. So I buy another stock at 50 and I sell it for 35. Those offset. So that, in very broad terms. So what people do is that they say, hey, I don't want to pay a big tax bill, so I'll offset the gains that I have with the losses that I have. And you got to be aware of things like wash rules and things like that. But all of this was reported on basically Schedule D of the tax return. So capital gains and losses. The other point of Anthony's questions is that he said sell stock held for 4 months. So like I mentioned, there's different types of capital gains. You have short-term capital gains, which is typically triggered after basically selling a position that's been held for less than a year. And these are taxed as ordinary income. So for most pharmacists, that's 24%, that's going to be your tax bracket, at the federal level. So that's basically when you hold a stock less than a year and your taxes are ordinary income. Long-term capital gains are more favorable. So they're taxed at preferred rates. So most pharmacists, their long-term capital gains tax is 15%. So 24 versus 15%. So if you can hold that a little bit longer and recognize your gain in terms of long-term capital gains, that's going to be much better in terms of the tax treatment. And then you're also taxed at the state level in most cases. Now, Anthony, for the state of Texas, you're not going to be taxed at the state level because Texas is just one of those states that doesn't tax on capital gains. So that's a benefit that you have as well. But that's kind of a very broad stroke view of things like, tax loss harvesting, wash sale, and then how to report these, the difference between long-term, short-term, et cetera. But it is definitely one of those things that you have to worry about in a taxable account and not something you have to worry about in the IRA 401k environment.
Great stuff, Tim Baker. Dropping knowledge left and right. I love it. And for those that are listening, this reminds me back to our investing series we did, episode 72 to 76. For those that are listening that are early on in their investing or just wanting to learn more about all the different investment options available, whether that's retirement or brokerage accounts, health savings accounts, we did a series on that a couple of years ago, episodes 72 to 76. So I'd reference you back there. The other thing, Tim, I was thinking about as you were talking, I hope many listeners like myself were hearing this and thinking, gosh, this is where a good tax professional on your team can really provide value. Obviously, they provide value in other places. But when you're really evaluating some of these investing decisions, and like we always talk about, not making any financial decision in a silo. Here again, we're talking about investing and tax implications that come along with that. And so, a shout out to our enrolled agent, Paul Eichenberg on the YFP team that works with our clients. But for those that are hearing this, not losing sight of how different parts of your financial plan can intersect with the tax piece and how important it is to have the financial planning piece married to that tax piece.
Yeah, and it might be something right now where a lot of the taxes are, I wouldn't say inconsequential, but again, as pharmacists grow their wealth,
Sure.
We're talking about tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in these accounts. It matters. And again, in my experience, one of the reasons that we do taxes as part of our service is that, sometimes there are, things that are lost between, hey, I'm working with my financial advisor, but then I'm also working with an accountant.
Right.
And I think if you can have that all, synced up, it just allows you to, the two big things that we're trying to get in front of when we're building wealth are inflation and the tax man. So if we can do those things efficiently, it puts you on a better path, a more efficient path to kind of get where you want to go.
Anthony, thank you again for taking time to submit your question. And as a small thank you, we're going to be sending you a super comfy YFP t-shirt. And to the YFP community, if you'd like to have your question featured on a future episode, please go to yourfinancialpharmacist.com/ask YFP or shoot us an email at info@yourfinancialpharmacist.com. Have a great rest of your week.